Hey folks, hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to be talking April Wine with Tim Durling, who's written a book about the band, going through their entire catalog and discussing all the records. And so we're going to bring Tim on. We're going to talk about his book, talk about April Wine, and enjoy. Here we go. Hey Tim, how are you today?
Doing really good, Hack. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. So April Wine. Yeah. Not a lot, probably not a lot of books on April Wine, you would think.
Not really. There's Miles Goodwin did his memoir about 10 years ago. Richie Henman, their original drummer, has a book which I've actually got to get. I got to read that one. And then this, I think, I really don't think there's another one that just talks about the entire April Wine catalog.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean about the band, not so much biographies. It's funny because April Wine, it's sort of, if you ask a person on the street, name some Canadian bands, they Rush, probably Triumph, maybe Tragically Hip. April Wine is one of those bands, I don't know, not that it got taken for granted, but that they're kind of always there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? They were always sort of on the radar, but they weren't like, they did hit their sort of peak there in the 80s, but they've had stuff. I mean, the first record I asked you earlier, you said came out in 71.
Yeah.
You go through their catalog and there's always, there's at least one song from every record that you would have heard on the radio.
Pretty much. Yeah. All the way through the 70s and 80s. Yeah. They were kind of a little minor institution here. And they're still a band that gets a lot of, there's probably a dozen songs that between like rock radio and just, oldies radio, whatever you want to call it now, that plays April Wine. And I think that a lot of people, especially here in Canada, know more songs by April Wine than maybe they think they do. I know that's happened with some of the friends of mine that I've asked to come on here, and they'll hear songs like Weeping Widow and Lady Run, Lady Hide and go, oh, I've heard this before. I just didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
It's kind of a varied sound, especially in the beginning. But yeah, they were just crisscross the country, since the early 70s. I mean, most people, if they're of any age, if they liked them, they've probably seen April Wine several times, and they could have seen them in a bar, or they could have seen them at, Maple Leaf Gardens at some point. You know what I mean? Like they just perennially on the road.
Yeah. They were a pretty slow build, right? If the first record came out in 71, in the 80s, they got major airplay. But I would say, that's a slow build. They probably were at it for a good 10 years before they really started to see results, I would think.
Internationally, yeah. In Canada, they had, they did pretty well with the second record, which is called On Record, which is the name of my book. But they had You Could Have Been a Lady there to cover the Hot Chocolate song. It was a huge hit in Canada. I think it went to number 2. Actually did crack the top 40 in the States. Unfortunately, I think one of the early mistakes that was made, they didn't capitalize on that and get down there and tour. They immediately started to work on another record. But then they had Stand Back in 75, which was a huge record in Canada. I think it was a double platinum album in its first couple of years of existence. And then the follow-up to that, The Whole World's Going Crazy, shipped platinum. It was a number 1 record. But in the States, it really wasn't until they signed to Capitol Records, and then, they put First Glance out in 78, which had Roller on it, which was their breakthrough single. And that took about a year before it started to get airplay. And then, of course, that set the stage for Harder, Faster, and then The Nature of the Beast, which are their 2 biggest albums. So, it was a slow build until they sort of broke internationally. And then, unfortunately, it didn't last long. It was it really kind of reverted back to like they're still big in Canada. And then they were, they were out of the picture for about 8 years. They disbanded at the end, in '84, and they didn't get back together until '92. But, in some form or another, they've kept at it. I mean, I saw them earlier this year opening for Triumph. So, they're just this, there's an appetite for this music, and people want to hear these songs.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned could have been a lady. When you're listening to I quickly, in preparation for this, quickly just dipped into a couple of records in their discography. And the early stuff is very of its time, very sticky guitar, very kind of hippie kind of vibe, folky kind of vibe. And then, but they always throw in like a heavy song, guitar song in there, but that sort of it almost like it didn't quite belong, but at the same time, it kind of was an indication of what was coming.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, Weeping Widow.
There's
pretty heavy song for 1973, and then the rest of that record, Electric Jewels. Well, there's a couple songs on there that are kind of heavy. The Band Has Just Begun and Cat's Claw, but for the most part, they were all over the place stylistically. I mean, their first couple of albums are kind of almost folky.
Yeah.
Until Miles Goodwin kind of took over as the main songwriter, that's sort of when they started to, make their, the albums started selling, because he could write rockers, he could write ballads. He was pretty versatile as a songwriter and a musician. So, they did have some early heavy songs, but you'd never call them an early purveyor of, hard rock or metal or anything, because they were just too all over the map. Somebody once mentioned to me, and I think it's kind of true, that April Wine was sort of like a Canadian version of Nazareth, because Nazareth started right around the same time, and they would have songs that were really, really heavy, but then they'd have folk songs or like really mellow songs.
Yeah.
I kind of see a lot of parallels, actually.
That's a good parallel. Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there, the lineup of the band, the original April Wine lineup, wasn't it like a couple of brothers or something?
Yeah, the original lineup. Miles kind of joined, I think, if I got this right, I think he kind of joined a band that was pretty much already in existence.
Okay.
And the band was Jim Henman, who was a vocalist. He played bass, and then Richie Henman, the drummer, and then David Henman, who played guitar and sang. Now, I get it mixed up. Two of them are brothers, one's a cousin.
Okay.
So basically, the first album is Miles and the Three Henmans. And Jim Henman left after the first album was replaced by Jim Clench. And that kind of changed the sound a little bit, because Jim Clench is on bass and vocals. He had a really raspy Jim Clench he sang Weeping Widow. He sang Ooh, What a Night. He had a totally different voice than Miles, but he had a cool raspy voice.
Mm-hmm.
And on record is a more polished version of what the debut was. It's still not quite there. It's, not every band can hit it out of the park right away, right? And then Electric Jewels is an improvement over that. But by the time they got to Stand Back, that's kind of the template of the April Wine sound that would, serve the band very well, and then, for the next however many years.
And so you got is it four people in the band at that point?
Yeah, they didn't become a 5-piece until Brian Greenway joined in 78, and then they had their 3 guitar attack.
That's when they had,
yeah.
That's when Roller and
then they started writing songs that utilized that, right?
Yeah,
Roller, and then they covered 21st Century Schizoid Man, and they took full advantage of having, you always had a rhythm guitar, even if they were playing, a twin lead, like on Sign of the Gypsy Queen and stuff like that.
Yeah, and yes, and those guitar parts were like, they didn't do the harmony guitar things like Thin Lizzy did, but it was more of like there were a lot of trade-offs between.
A lot of trade-offs. So there are some songs, actually. It's interesting because I'm kind of a relative newcomer to Thin Lizzy compared to April Wine, but I hear some April Wine songs that, boy, that reminds me of Thin Lizzy. So I have to think that there was a Thin Lizzy influence. Like there's a song on The Nature of the Beast Telling Me Lies, and there's a section in there that reminds me of I think it's Vagabonds of the Western World, but I don't know. I hear bits that remind me of Thin Lizzy, but yeah, they would trade off leads.
Yeah. They definitely. I mean, those songs are they're radio staples like Roller and
Yeah.
Ooh What a Night, and I mean, we try to play Ooh What a Night with a bar band that I was in, and that was just terrible.
It's their songs are they sound simple.
Yeah.
But they'll throw in a strange time signature.
Yeah.
What a Night's tricky. It's got tricky timing on it. It's like,
yeah, when do you come in on the bell?
When do you come in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Like you come in on the and instead of the one, and it could turn into a train wreck really easily.
That was the problem. Everybody was coming in at a different point, right?
Yeah.
So that was a tricky one. Yeah. But yeah. So I guess, I mean, you've obviously spent a lot of time going through their catalog and going through their music. Is there any particular like hidden gems that you found that, maybe weren't on the radio that most, people would not be familiar with? Like any album specifically or album cuts?
It's interesting because I always, every time I do one of these books, I listen to the entire catalog pretty heavily, and I find that there's certain albums that I've heard a lot, like Harder, Faster, Nature of the Beast, Power Play, Stand Back. I'm still not the biggest fan of the first album. It's just so eclectic and so different. I find that a difficult listen myself, except for Fast Train. And there's a couple other songs that I kind of like that kind of snuck up on me. Like there's a song Wench, and then there's a song called Listen Mister that are a little bit better than I remembered. On Record's a better album than I remember it, the second album. I think they have a lot of songs that could have been radio staples. I got into the band kind of late. I got into them in '93 when they came back with that album Attitude, which was a pretty rocking album for them. And it actually was a gold record here in Canada. And because that album didn't get an international release, I think that's an album a lot of people would be surprised if they checked that out. So I think there's some good songs on that record, like Give It a Take, and it can't. Can't Take Another Night's a good ballad, but Girl in My Dreams, Here's Looking at You, Kid, That's Love. That's Love got some airplay, and there was a video for it, and it actually got enough airplay that it charted on the Billboard Rock chart, which is pretty good for an import. But I would say, find the Attitude album, because it's probably their heaviest. Well, Harder, Faster is probably their heaviest album in its time, but Attitude's a pretty solid rocking album too. So I'd say check that album out, and I think that's a lost gem that just simply didn't get an international release, so not enough people got to hear it.
Yeah, I'll definitely be checking that one out. Yeah. So I mean, right now at this point, April Wine. I mean, who is left in the band, in the original band? Is it just
there are no original members left. When Miles Goodwin passed away, he was the only original member. He was the only guy that had been from the first album all the way through. I mean, they haven't recorded an album in 20 years, but Brian Greenway is the senior member, and he leads.
That's what I meant from the main line.
He's from the best known lineup. Jerry Mercer retired from the band. Gary Moffat left in '84, and he never came back. Bass player Steve Lang unfortunately passed away, as did bassist Jim Clench. So Brian's leading the band now. And, I mentioned this in the book. I'm not the type of person to go on the internet and spout my 2 cents about what I think about, if a band doesn't have any original members, because people enjoy it. So it's not, it's not up to me to make that decision. But quietly to myself, I was thinking, boy, I don't really think I want to go see April Wine without Miles Goodwin. And it just so happens that they were opening for Triumph, and there was no way I wasn't going to go see that Triumph show, because they've always been one of my favorite bands. Mm-hmm. And by the time I started going to see shows, they were broken up and not on the road. So this was going to be the best I could do. And April Wine opened that show, and I was convinced. They've got Mark Parent on vocals and guitar, and he doesn't try to sound like Miles. He just sings the songs really well. And people responded. They opened with "Ooh What a Night," and the crowd lost it as soon as those bells came on. So you know what? People want to hear this music, and it's in good hands with this. I would go see April Wine by themselves now, whereas I don't think I would have before. So they changed my mind.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the only thing that bothers me about not having original members is when they advertise some of these bands, April Wine or Foreigner or pick one, and on the radio ad they'll be playing their hits.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, you and I are like, we're knee deep into this stuff, so we kind of know what the story is. But if you're like the average person and thinks they're going to go see the 1980 version of such band, and then they get there and it's like, well, they're different people. That kind of bothers me a little bit.
It bothers me in a little bit of a way, but at the same time, especially with the internet, I understand, like, to most people, like, we live, eat, breathe music stuff, and it's never just background noise, and we know the histories of these bands, so we know what we're going to see.
Yeah.
To most people, it's just background. They'll like a song here and there. Hey, I like this song. I like that song. We'll go see them. Most of the time, they probably didn't know who was in April Wine anyway. April Wine was one of those sort of, unless you were really into the band, you could probably go see them and think that was great and not know anybody that was in the band. But then again, you're right. There are people that probably buy a ticket to go see Journey and fully expect to see Steve Perry.
Steve Perry, yeah.
And it's like, don't you know? But no, they don't, because it's not something that they spend any time thinking about. It's just music.
What I would prefer in place of that, because normally what people would notice is the vocals primarily. That's what they would pick out. Well, that doesn't sound like the guy singing on the songs that I remember. Well, what I would prefer is when they had these ads for these bands, if they played the current version of the band in the ads, play the same hits, that people know and they want to come out and see, but play the current band playing those songs, so they know, oh wait, okay, it's a little different, but I still like it and I'm still gonna go. I don't know, it's almost, for me, it just hints a little bit of false advertising,
I don't know if that's down to the band or their management, or that's down to the promoter getting a hold of a good live recording, or if it's a print ad making sure it's an up-to-date photo of the band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I distinctly remember going to see April Wine in the 90s, and the advertisement in the newspaper was the cover that's on their greatest hits album. Well, okay, it just so happens that 3/5 of that band were there, but that's not who you're going to see exactly. And that always bugged me too. But that always reeked of either laziness or they just couldn't be bothered to fact check. So I don't know who that's on. I really don't know who that's on. I don't think it's on the consumer necessarily.
Yeah.
And then you might tell people and they'd be like, whatever, I don't care. I like this song, and they're going to play that song, right? Yeah. Yes. Well, then I'm going. But yeah, I know what you mean. There's a lot of bands, like Foreigner is a good example. There are no original members. I saw Foreigner in 2018, and that might have been one of the only appearances Mick Jones made because it was early in the tour.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to catch Foreigner. Actually, when I saw them, Mick Jones was playing guitar. Jason Bonham was on the drums. That's how long ago that was.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got lucky. Yeah.
I saw Foreigner in 98, and Lou was still in the band, but Lou was in bad shape at that point, and we didn't know why. Nobody knew that he was, how sick he was.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, we're talking about different bands. We're gonna get back to April Wine.
This is what we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's a lot of bands that are in the same boat. But if the music is played well, and Brian might as well be. He's not a founding member, but he might as well be. He's an honorary. You know what I mean? Like, he's been such an important part of that group. He was with them all. It's not like you've got one guy in the band that never had any hits. You know what I mean? Like, he was in the band in their most popular incarnation.
Yeah. So tell us about the book. How's the book laid out? How is it similar to the style that the Fleetwood Mac book is, album by album?
It's different from the Fleetwood Mac book, and then that one I wrote, that one's all me. But this book is like my Y&T book. It's like my Kansas book. It's like my Night Ranger book, where it's a panel book. it's very much like anybody that's got any of Martin Popoff's album by album books. I very much model them after that because I think that's a really cool platform to get content and get opinions on the music that are different than my own. So I've got a bunch of different panelists in here. And speaking of Martin, he writes the foreword to this, which is pretty cool. But I've got some returning people in here, and then I've got some people that have been in one of my books for the very first time. And we go through all of the 16 April Wine studio albums and basically go through each song. Here's what we think of them. Here's what we think of the production. And like all of my books, if there are any B-sides, which in April Wine's case, there's a handful of B-sides, I talk about them in context with the album that they, the singles that they belong to there. I tried to capture every officially released song that they've had. And, the overwhelming thing that gets me every time I get talking about April Wine is that their back catalog is in dire need of curating. And they haven't really had a proper reissue campaign that most classic rock bands get. And it's just a shame because, like I said, they've probably got about 6 B-sides that have only ever existed on 45. They've never been released digitally or on CD. And there's a market out there for that. Or they've got a lot of different mixes of songs that only existed as 45s or on vinyl. So, it would be great if somebody could take the reins like a Rock Candy Records or Rhino or Universal or someone like that and just really do it justice. But I don't know how much of a market there is now for it besides the 2 or 3 really big albums. Unidisc took control of the Aquarius back catalog, which is most of April Wine stuff, in 2008, 2009, and they did some decent reissues. It was the first time that the 3 live albums ever existed on CD, so that was kind of cool. But since then, there hasn't really been anything else. And it's a shame because it's not, if you go, you could go to a Walmart now and still buy Journey's Greatest Hits or some Foreigner Best Of. And it's in, it would be like an impulse buy for people. April Wine don't get that. And I think that they deserve that, especially here in Canada.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of this book, what would be the best way to do it, Tim?
All my books are available through Amazon. They just got to look for my name, and they should all pop up. It's somehow miraculous. I have no idea how it happened. This is my 7th book, so
wow,
it's pretty crazy. In the last 4 years, I've put out, or 5 years, I guess, I've put out 7 books. So, but I'm happy with how it came out, and yeah, this is just it's everything all in one place. And it's the type of book that I think needed to be done. I think every classic band deserves a book to commemorate them and say, this is what they did. These are the albums. This is the songs that come from them. And instead of just looking on the internet, which is this vast wide, if you don't even know where to start, here's where to start. And if you hear a song on the radio, if you hear like Enough Is Enough on the radio, you're like, oh, I like that song. What album is that on? You can find it. And then you can take it from there. You're like, maybe I'll get the album that's on, and if I like that, maybe I'll get another album. So that's kind of the goal with this, is to just spread the word that, hey, you know what, this people might be surprised to find out, there are 16 April Wine studio albums of material.
It's I mean, when I quickly went through the discography, it's a pretty deep catalog. I had no idea that many records. Yeah. Awesome. All right, was there any last things you want to mention before we wrap this up?
I just thank you for having me on and to talk about it. And just no matter where you are in the world, wherever your local Amazon is, should have them. If you can't find them, please get in touch with me and let me know, and I'll find out why, because they should be print on demand from anywhere you can get Amazon.
Okay. You know what? If you send me a couple of links, I'll throw them in the description of this video.
Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. All right. I want to thank Tim for coming on, and I want to thank you folks for watching, and we'll catch you next time on the channel. Cheers. Take care.